Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum viewers. I'm your host S M Hali, presenting another edition of Defense and Diplomacy. And today happens to be the Defense Day of Pakistan, which we commemorate when the people and the armed forces of Pakistan bravely defended the homeland against naked aggression by our eastern neighbor India. But today we would like to focus our attention on a different aspect, which is Pakistan's road to self-reliance in defense. Self-reliance, dear viewers, is a very ephemeral term and a very tricky one for Pakistan, because when Pakistan gained independence in 1947, it was such that the 16 ordnance factories which were placed by the British in undivided India, not a single one of them came in Pakistan's share. And also, the division of assets was supposed to be at a ratio of 64 to 36%, but unfortunately, owing to Indian obduracy, we not only were deprived of some of it, but most of what we received was in a dilapidated condition. And Pakistan was thrust into the Kashmir War right in 47 and 48, followed by wars in 65 and 71. Thus, our road to self-reliance has been a thorny one. And Epicurus has said that freedom is the best fruit of self-reliance. But before I ramble on, let me not steal the thunder from our very eminent panelist. We are honored to have in our studio today Lt Gen Amjad Shoaib, who has had an illustrious army career. He was commissioned in 1965 and has also been the Adjutant General. Welcome to the show, sir. We have with us Vice Admiral Shahid Iqbal, who has been the Vice Chief of the Naval Staff, as currently he is the Rector of the Bahria University. Welcome, sir. And we have with us Air Marshal Shahid Latif, who has been the Vice Chief of the Air Staff, but more importantly, he has been head of the pride of Pakistan's road to self-reliance, that is the JF-17 Thunder program. So let me start the discussion with you. How do you view the Pakistan Army's path to self-reliance?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Initially, we have been dependent on mostly on United States, and then came a period when we realized that it's not a very reliable source, and we have to do something to
in fact, to set the record straight, sir, if you recall, in 1965,
we had a very serious problem with the United States.
Sanctions were placed against Pakistan and India both, yes. But it didn't...
Actually, it was Pakistan which was mainly affected, because Pakistan was dependent on the United States. With that, the first thought which came into the mind was that we should be self-reliant in munitions first. All sorts of ammunition should be manufactured, because you don't change your guns every third day, but you can expend your all the ammunition within a few days. So initially that was the thrust, and I would say that by the grace of Allah Almighty today, Pakistan is manufacturing all types of munitions which Pakistan Army is utilizing. Pakistan Army, even the heavy gun ammunitions and field to heavy guns, rockets, missiles.
So would you categorically say that Pakistan is self-reliant as far as munitions are concerned?
Absolutely. And that was a very big achievement, because that gives you the sustainability. If you have to stay in a war for a longer period, the expendable things are to be there in your reserve, otherwise you will have a very serious problem. And ammunition is one of the most important things that you need. And when you are manufacturing all sorts of ammunition yourself, so you can sustain the war, and you can also go ahead with any...
I'll just get back to you, then we'll talk about the main battle tank, which
yes.
has been again a pride of the nation.
Yes.
Admiral Shahid, Pakistan Navy was unfortunately neglected in the initial years, especially by landlubbers who did not realize the importance of Pakistan Navy. But in the past couple of decades, this importance and focus has shifted. How do you see the Pakistan Navy's role in road to self-reliance?
I think there has been a tremendous improvement as far as indigenous development is concerned, or the self-reliance is concerned. what had been happening in the early days, that the most of the equipment was being imported from the West, because some of the ships which had been came to Pakistan, they had been the British heritage actually, basically. So we had been dependent, and most of the supplies and most of the equipment which need to be replaced had to be brought from UK. Then subsequently, then the reliance had been on the US in terms of the submarines which had been inducted, and subsequently the things started actually changing. And ever since the 1960s, then there had been a thought process that something should be done in order to actually initiate this indigenous development or indigenous refurbishment of some of the equipment which had actually outlived its age. So the Navy established a Department of Indigenous actually development, and they had been able to actually take on some of the smaller, actually the assemblies of the ships and the submarines. But ever since the inception of the MTC, the things are improving, and in the intervening period, the Navy had been able to actually have TOT arrangements with the submarines, construction, and then
Frigates.
with the frigate F-22P.
So I think we'll come into a little detail a little later. So if you just hold that thought, Air Marshal Shahid, it must be a matter of personal pride for you to see JF-17 Thunder roaring through the skies. How do you describe this project?
Well, JF-17 is indeed is a role model, I think, for the entire country. It's not just in the field of defense. I think elsewhere also it sets an example of how a true collaboration with another country can be achieved, and how transfer of technology can pay dividends. The genesis of this program, as you would know, lies back in the 80s, when our main workhorse, which was the F-6, a copy of the MiG-19,
but an improved version, of course.
Improved version in the sense that, yes, they had improved it, plus we kept improving it over a period of time. And that was now to be retired. It had outlived its life. And we had to buy more Chinese aeroplanes, as technology from elsewhere was difficult to get, one, and two, it was very expensive. Traditionally, therefore, after 65 war, as you know, the Chinese systems have been our mainstay. And it was now the turn of the F-7P aircraft, and that was a copy once again of the MiG-21, a Russian aeroplane. When we thought of the future requirement, we realized that the F-7 would not meet our future requirements in its present shape. And therefore, there was a study ordered, once again in collaboration with the Chinese, and it was with an American company, Northrop Grumman. This project was called Sabre 2, and the objective of this study was to see how this F-7 can be improved to meet our future requirements in terms of quality, technology. We had to improve the basic platform. There were deficiencies in the platform that were identified, and we also had to improve its avionics, because that was not modern by any standard. In that study, which lasted several months, we found out that it wasn't cost effective. The cost that had to be incurred on this modernization program, when compared with other options, was too high. So therefore, the study was dropped, and this was the end of 80s. We pulled back, but Chinese benefited from that study, and they continued their further research. And in the next 5 to 6 years, they came up with an idea that with the help of this work that they had undertaken in collaboration with Northrop Grumman, they could think of a brand new aeroplane, and that they called as Super 7 or the FC-1. Okay. The FC-1 is the Chinese name, Super 7 for Pakistan.
Right.
So that was the basis of this whole project.
Okay.
Would you want me to continue?
No, just a little. I'll just get back to you.
Okay.
So let's now talk about the main battle tank.
Yes. Right from 47 onward, we were looking for tanks, and at that time, whatever, as you have brought out earlier, whatever we got in the form of our share from the British in heritage, that was very little. Sherman old tanks of
Second World War vintage.
Second World War vintage, and that too perhaps was being shunted out everywhere, and people were not interested in that tank. But at that time, after the Korean War, we got M48, M47 tanks, which Americans didn't want to take along, and they just left it in various countries. That tank at that time gave us some sustenance, and perhaps in 1965 war, we utilized those tanks. But then we realized in 1965 war that these tanks are not really meeting the requirements of the modern battlefield. So one has to look for various other tanks. At that time, we didn't have access to any other technology, so we straight away got T-59 from Chinese, and subsequently we got an improved version of T-59, which was called T-85 from the Chinese. And at that time, again, we realized when the Indians were developing their own main battle tank, Arjun, and then Arjun also had many shortcomings, but they were dependent on Russians, so they were trying to help them out. So we realized that if we have to stay in the battlefield, we have to have better firepower, we have to have better mobility, and we have to have better acquisition arrangement with the tanks. So acquisition of target with the modern acquisition measures. With that, then this idea of main battlefield tank Al-Khalid, which we have today, came up, and again our friends Chinese, they were there to help us out.
So could you briefly talk about its capabilities, because the audience would be very keen to know that.
This tank definitely, first of all, it uses variety of ammunitions. Tank to tank for tank to tank battle, for anti-personnel, for bunker busting. So that capability was not there with M48. And then you have the laser systems and precision systems with it. A capability of without refueling, it can move around in the battlefield for about 300 kilometers, which means say that it can sustain itself for a number of days. Because refueling for the tanks is a very big problem. You have to have a very long
one of the problems Arjun faces is overheating.
That's a very heavy tank.
Yeah.
Weight-wise, this is comparatively a lighter tank, so it utilizes less of fuel. So mobility is much better.
Right. So I'll just get back to you, sir. And when we do, we would like to talk about the missile technology, because that again is something we need to take pride in. So Admiral Shahid, you were going to tell us about the Augusta 90B and especially the self-reliant program through Pakistan.
Once the Navy found that the Daphne, the submarines which were being held as a part of the inventory of the Navy.
And Daphne is French.
French. They were getting aged. So there had been a planning, although the planning had started much earlier. However, they had to decide that what is going to be the replacement of the Daphnes. So as per the naval staff requirement, they thought that it may be prudent that they should continue to remain engaged with the DCNS, that is the firm which had constructed the Daphne submarines. So they concluded a contract with the DCNS to actually procure 3 submarines, and one of the submarines had to be actually built in France, and the rest of the 2 submarines had to be built in Pakistan on the TOT basis, the transfer of technology arrangement. The idea was that we should continue to actually develop our skills and the capacity to actually construct submarines in-house. So this whole program had been manifested as it had been planned. One of the submarines was constructed there, it came over to Pakistan, and then 2 of the submarines, they had been built and constructed in the Pakistan Navy dockyard. And this program had been of a great success, and I think in the process, Navy had been able to actually enhance the capacity of its technicians who had been employed for more than 3 to 4 years in building of this submarine. So it was a very, very good decision, and it really gave a lot of dividends to the Pakistan Navy. And in the process, I think now they are in a position to undertake a new project vis-a-vis the construction of submarine. But one point I would like to highlight over here is that the TOT arrangement is only beneficial provided if the service gets into the serial construction of the same platform. Because once the capacity has been built and if it is not utilized, then it tends to get eroded. So the investment which has been made on developing the manpower, that tends to get waste. So this is where I think the problem is.
It's a very important point, the continuation.
Continuation of the project. Right. Because at the time of signing of the TOT, the understanding had been that the Navy is going to have more than 3 submarines. So once this project is actually over and they have been able to attain the requisite expertise, then they would get into the serial construction, because that is not only the cheaper proposition, but it is also a great leap forward as far as the
when I come back to you, we'll talk about the frigate F-22P. It was a very fascinating narration you had started, and in fact if you compare it with India's LCA, which was started much earlier, ours is a story of success. Please continue.
Okay, but before I take up this project, this is not to take away the credit from the Air Force that continues its program on indigenization, and ever since the inception of this Air Force, it has been an ongoing program. There is a department in our plans directorate by the name of OR&D, Ops Research and Development, and that remains busy with operational research and development programs. So there's a huge list of indigenization programs that we can count. However, since we are focusing on the JF-17, I'll get back to the JF-17. Like you said, that once the Chinese had continued with this study and we had dropped out of this program, in the 90s, as you recall, there were sanctions imposed on us, and I must give credit to our leadership that anticipated the problems.
Due to the Pressler Amendment.
I'm talking about Pressler Amendment, yes, that's correct. So they anticipated very severe difficulties in terms of procurement of aircraft, which obviously are sophisticated in technology, and this kind of technology the world does not afford anymore to a country like us. So they, in that anticipation, they contacted the Chinese once again, and we showed our keenness to join them in any future aircraft development program. And the Chinese had by now prepared a plan for the Super 7, and they accepted this from our side, and they asked us to be partners in that program. We joined that program. Over the next about 5 to 6 years, unfortunately, the pace was very slow. I think we made a cardinal error here. What the Chinese and we together were trying to achieve was that we were trying to put everything in one place and in one go: the platform, avionics, and weapons, which is not the correct way of going about this kind of a program. And since you mentioned LCA, the Indians made this mistake in LCA, and they are suffering on that account till today, because they wanted to have the avionics of that time, they wanted to have the weaponry of that time, and they wanted to build the airframe around that avionics and weaponry.
The platform.
They were building the platform around these two things. Since they put those two, the avionics and the weapons of that time, into this aeroplane and built it around that, everything is now obsolete.
Obsolescence set in before it actually
before even the project materialized. Till about 2000, we were making the same mistake. It is in 2001 when our command changed, and you recall I took over as the chief project director. At this time, I had been the deputy chief project director of this project before that for about 2 years. That is when I had realized that this is the mistake that we are making. Avionics and weapons that we want for the future are not available at that time, were not available. So why should we not go ahead with the platform and keep space like they had done in the F-16 and all modern aeroplanes, that not only that you keep space, you cater for a complete growth potential throughout the lifespan of that aeroplane. And that was the technology. Because of my own F-16 background, I was convinced that that was the approach we should take. But since I wasn't heading the project, it wasn't really at that time being acceptable. When this happened, I talked to the chief at that time, and he said immediately, let's review this. We reviewed it and we called it a new approach, and we delinked the platform from avionics and weapons. And that is where we really moved so rapidly that it is nearly a record. In the modern history, you don't have a fighter aeroplane in the contemporary class that would match the JF-17 because it is modern by all standards, it is high-tech by all standards, and that you would be able to complete in 2.5 years only, 2001, and we flew the prototype in August 2003.
Absolutely, and it is now giving good service to the Pakistan Air Force.
The Western press had simply refused to accept it, and they were, at that time, there were articles that were being published saying that this is a paper program, that this won't see the light of the day.
But in fact, when you put it up in the Farnborough, everybody it was the star of the show.
Yes, it was.
As a last round, so let's talk about the missile technology, because Pakistan has made great headway.
As far as the missile technology is concerned, I think the philosophy which Pakistan Army adopted was excellent philosophy. The experience tells that a system, a platform is developed. It goes and starts ruling the modern platform, starts ruling the battlefield, like you have a modern tank, for example. But the experience also tells that after a few years, ultimately you do have an anti-system coming up for the same thing. And that very expensive modern weapon system which is brought to the battlefield to rule the battlefield, that gets redundant or it gets beaten off. So the philosophy was that let's concentrate on anti-systems. Tanks are, and then the experience also tells that the anti-systems are much cheaper as compared to the main weapon system for which it is developed.
So anti means anti-tank,
anti-aircraft, or anti-bunker. Anything that you can think of in the battlefield, you have your own weapon systems also, you have your own tanks. But then instead of investing in more tanks, which is more expensive, you look for the best tank in the world and start developing the anti-system for that. And that is what the Pakistan Army has done. Our Green Arrow anti-tank weapon system is very effective. It can be compared with any available weapon system in the world. Similarly, the SAMs, they are doing very well, and we have tried it out.
No, but what about the cruise missile? Because that's not exactly an anti-system, it's an offensive weapon.
I mean, Army has worked on these things, but then the main achievement during the recent years has been the cruise missile and our own long-range missiles, which are being developed by the Strategic Plans Division. In that, cruise missile is a very special weapon, which the Western powers have been doubting that we were not capable of developing, and they sometimes have been now leveling allegations that we have copied the technology. But our plans division, strategic plans division, they had thrown up an open challenge that it can be examined by any scientist of the Western world, and they can then...
And we as Pakistanis need to take pride, it is our own indigenous design.
Our own indigenous, and at the same time, this weapon system is very, very accurate system. Its accuracy, its guidance system has been most modern. It is the most modern system which has been incorporated, and I have talked to the concerned people. They are very, very happy about it, very confident. Similarly, the long-range weapon systems, which today we have.
So since I'm running short of time, so let me move on. So very briefly talk about the F-22P project, the frigate.
It is, I think, Navy is one of the leading program at the moment, and first 3 ships had been built in China, and the 4th one is being built in Pakistan at the Pakistan shipyard and works. And this was also a program which had been concluded under the arrangement of TOT, the transfer of technology. So the idea being that once the ships had been built and and the consecutive ships which had been built, some of the problem which arose in the initial stages of the first ship, they had been taken care of by the design office in the China. And once the design had been improved and consolidated, then the fourth ship that is being built at the Karachi shipyard. So I think it is a very, very important program.
Besides this, if you could just very briefly talk about the missile boats, the mine hunters and all, which have again been indigenously produced.
You see, I said that since 80s, there had been a realization that something needs to be done because we cannot rely on the foreign sources. So to start with, the Navy had actually embarked on constructing its own floating docks. Then they actually went to have an indigenous construction of the gunboats and the missile boat, then the mine hunter, then ultimately culminating to one of the biggest platform, which is F-22P.
The fleet tanker. No, what about the fleet tanker?
And some of the fleet small tankers, they had also been built in the mid-80s, and they have been in the service for the last so many years.
Okay, Air Marshal, I'm sorry we are very short of time, but if you could conclude what you were saying and any other addition you would like to make.
Yes, I think we have taken a giant step in terms of aircraft designing, development and manufacturing. What I would like to say is that the grounds are already set. We've got transfer of technology done, not only in the airframe, but also in the avionics, which is a very sophisticated field. And we have set up our facilities in Kamra, both for the avionics co-production as well as the airframe co-production. And you would be happy to know that in our contract, there is as much as 58% part in the co-production for Pakistan, vis-a-vis the 42% given to the lead partners. This is not a small achievement by any standard. The objective is threefold. One, to meet our operational needs. Two, to be able to contribute to the economy of this country by exporting this aeroplane, particularly to the regional countries where it is very attractive. Like you said that in Farnborough last time, it was an attraction for everybody. This aeroplane has been built around the international standard as opposed to the Chinese standards, and this was once again because of our pushing. And finally, because we have set up a flight test center, which will also look after the modern and the future developments on this aeroplane. So I think the field is open to us now, and it is for us as to how much can we really make out of it.
Right. So viewers, with that we come to the end of this very intense discussion. And as you notice, all our three participants who are experts in their field in their own right have shared with us the technology, the spirit behind self-reliance, which was not just to pay lip sympathy, but to actually put Pakistan on the path to a self-reliant, defensive nation, which could meet its own needs. Ralph Waldo Emerson, the US social thinker, has written a whole treatise on self-reliance, and he talks about it in great detail. Now is not the time to delve into that, but the important thing is that we have not only received self-reliance in the three different services, but also the allied services, like in the field of optronics. We have developed the night vision goggles, we have developed the night vision devices, we have also developed the UAVs, and so many other things that I could go on and on. But let me suffice it here by thanking our participants, General Amjad, Vice Admiral Shahid, and Air Marshal Shahid. Viewers, keep watching us and keep sending us your comments, and hope to see you next week, inshallah. Allah Hafiz.